All right. Good evening, everybody. And it is another great day to be a Bulldog. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I'm so excited to just be able to have all the kids back in the building and all the teachers back this week. We had a great start to our professional development over the last couple days, and we are going to just continue to just keep moving and keep cruising here. But before we get started tonight, I brought in our fearless pastor, Father Matt, and he's going to lead us in an opening prayer.
It's great to see everybody. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Gracious and loving God, giving praise and thanksgiving for the beauty of this day. Thank you, God, for our parents and our students and our teachers. Continue to rain down the power of the Spirit, to give them courage, to give them wisdom, to allow them to teach, to learn, to share, to care, and to love, and to keep the faith alive here. Lord, we ask you to send your Holy Spirit to healing, the power of Jesus to touch and to bring mending to our world. Those who need physical or spiritual, emotional healing, Lord, we ask you to rain down that spirit upon this country and this world, so all of us are lifted from anxiety. Lord, I am so grateful for the people at St. James. Thank you for the leadership, the staff, and all the teachers. And may God bless us and keep us and bless our homes with great days of joy, fortitude, and faith. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. I'm wearing my mask because I'm sitting next to Mike at a safe 6-foot distance, but I'm going to leave and Mike can take off his mask now. You guys have a great day. And just to tell you, I'm so happy to see you. I'm going to show you my pearly whites, and God bless you all. Amen.
All right. Thank you, Father Matt. And like Father said, he has safely cleared the room. So I'm going to take my mask off and show you my pearly whites as well. But anyways, again, thank you for everybody for being here. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get rolling. This is being recorded, and we will send out a recording to all the families who couldn't see it tonight, or for you who are watching live that just want to recap some of the points that we make tonight. As we're going along, at the end, we're going to hold off and do our little Q&A at the end. So please, if you have any questions or comments, just hold them until the end, because I'm not going to be able to see those chats until I get through my PowerPoint presentation and everything like that. So again, there will be time for questioning at the end, but right now we are going to kind of get through some of the presentations based off the questions you sent in. I also want to thank everybody for sending in those questions. We received quite a few, and it was really helpful to help guide this meeting tonight to make sure that we are hitting all the key points so that we all can feel safe and prepared for the school year ahead of us. Okay, so I am going to pull up our town hall meeting PowerPoint tonight. And again, I'm going to go through all these point by point, and we're going to keep things moving along pretty good here. And then we'll hit comments as we get to the end. All right, we got opening prayer from Father Matt. Okay, so to address some of the questions regarding masks. So again, just a reminder, masks will be something that the students will have to wear before they enter the building and as they're in the building each day. Students have the choice of wearing either disposable or these cloth masks similar to what I have here. There are 4 times throughout the school day when students can take their masks off. Anytime they're outside, and our teachers are going to be working to really utilize those outside spaces. This week or next week, we are going to kind of divvy up all the grassy areas and the parking lot spaces so that they can be really utilized as outdoor classes. Teachers can take their kids out for sustained silent reading, lunch times, all those kinds of things so that the kids can get a little bit of a breather, but then also get some fresh air and have a different environment. So outside, lunch is another time where they could take their masks off and to talk a little bit about lunch. Most days, students will be eating lunch in their classroom, but we are going to rotate kids through our lunchroom as well, at least once a week, and do that with 50 or less people in the room and no more than 2 cohorts on opposite ends of the cafeteria. That way, we're just keeping people distanced and safe, and then disinfect in between group use in the cafeteria, meaning spraying all the tables and chairs down as needed. When they're in the classroom, they can take their masks off. We'll have an area to put their masks into so that it is safe and everything is taken care of. Students will eat their lunches, and then afterwards they will disinfect their tables and all those things. So one note about lunch as well, because of our allergy students, we're asking that all families really just be safe about what we send in our students' lunches this year, because our classrooms are nut-free, and that includes peanuts and tree nuts. So as you're working on putting lunches together this year, please keep that in mind, because we want to be conscious of our students and our friends who have some allergies. And in the classrooms, we will continue to remain tree nut and peanut free. So keep that in mind as we pack lunches. Another time students can take their masks off, again, is snack breaks. Again, snacks, perfect things, fruits, veggies, non-allergenic snacks would be fantastic throughout the day. And then for our little ones, during rest and nap times, they can take their masks off so they're not trying to sleep or rest using the mask. We will position kids on the floor, spaced out in a way that's safe for them to do that in the classroom. So those are the main times they could take their masks off. The color requirement, we got a few questions about color requirement on the masks. We're asking that if you can find predominantly one color masks, that would be ideal. Obviously, we know that sometimes it's hard, especially for the really young kids, to not have images or things on there. So just do your best in finding masks. Really, the goal is that it's not a distracting thing. There's not crazy pictures on it or things like that that'll distract from the educational environment. So do your best when you're shopping for masks with your kids. Also, the surgical masks are plain, and those work great as well. For the neck gaiters, so to describe what the gaiters are, that's the piece of cloth that goes all the way around your neck, and you can pull it over your entire mouth. And there's some conflicting research coming out. As of this moment, they are approved by the Archdiocese of Chicago to wear, and they specify that usually the neck gaiters that are approved have multiple layers of fabric. But there's some research coming out conflicting with that. And what we'll do is we'll keep you posted before the beginning of the school year whether or not neck gaiters are going to be permitted, as the Archdiocese has time to process that new data that's coming out. If they are banned, then we will ask students to wear masks. But in the meantime, just make sure if your kid is planning on wearing a gaiter to school, make sure that they have masks as backups, so that we can make sure that we're protecting everybody the best we can. And last but not least, there was a lot of questions about, will my student get punished if their mask falls off? And we understand there's going to be a very large learning curve here that's going to go into masks. Kids aren't used to wearing them. They can be a little itchy, and they can, get a little tired from it. But we're going to be really patient with the kids. We're going to give them frequent reminders. We're going to really work with them to learn how to put these on. And then also for them to help understand the why behind why they're wearing them. Not that it's, that they're worried about getting each other sick, but it's the transfer to other folks, and, making sure that we're doing things above board and being healthy. So with the masks, there's not going to be super harsh consequences. Now, if a student is doing it on purpose, we're going to have a conversation with that child and remind them the importance of wearing masks. But we understand that, especially in the beginning, there's going to be a steep learning curve. But I'm really confident our kids are going to be able to wear masks successfully throughout the school day. Even just a personal note, my 4-year-old son the other day was sitting at home, and he just started putting his mask on when he was in his playroom. And we were like, hey, what's going on? Why are you wearing your mask? And he just like, oh, I got used to it from wearing it at church. And we were like, okay. So I think our kids are really resilient, and I think that they're going to pick it up really quickly, and it'll become a new reality. And we're going to continue to work with them and make adjustments along the way as we go. So wellness checks. So these are the things that are going to happen before our students come into the building. And this is going to happen actually in the car as you bring your child to school. So there's going to be 4 main things that are going to go into it. A temperature check. We have the touchless thermometer gun. So we'll take a temperature of their forehead. There'll be a symptom check. So basically saying, hey, how you feeling? Do you have any coughs, sore throat? Are you feeling a little nauseous? Those kinds of things. Students will sanitize their hands either at the car if they have one on them, or they'll be sanitizing stations as they come into the school. And then they're going to have a mask check to make sure that they have their masks on them and that they have them on before they enter the building. So when a student has a temperature of 100.4 or higher, we're going to ask that student stay in the car and go home for monitoring. And if symptoms get worse, a visit to the doctor, just so that we're being cautious and safe. Even if it is not the coronavirus, we just still want to make sure that we're trying to keep infection and sick, kids at home so that they can get better. Now we have a different layer, and our nurses are awesome team of nurses wanted to put together. Their normal line is the 99.4 as their fever, where they will pull a kid out of class. So if a student is in the building or is on the way in and they have a 99.4, we're still working with our team to figure out exactly what that'll look like. But more than likely, there would be further. This child will be visited by the nurses to see whether or not they are sick, if they're just running a hot fever, or we might just ask that child to be at home for the day, just so that, again, if things escalate, we don't want to infect other students. And one point about the temperature checks as well, when you guys are pulling in or you're coming to school, driving your cars, please, if you're usually a windows person and it's a hot day, please roll up your windows and use your air conditioning, because that can sometimes throw off the temperature of the kids in the back if it's a really hot day. So please keep your cars running, and we'll get their temperature checks, and then we'll get them into school fairly quickly. We also had some questions about students who ride their bikes or walk to school. And the main entrances that we have students coming in, there will be people there stationed with the temperature guns to do the checks before those students come in the building. So they can still walk to school as they normally would, and they'll get their check before entering the building. Okay, so we had a lot of questions about cleaning and sanitization of the school. So we have a night crew that's going to come in every single night, Sunday through Thursday, so that before the kids get to school, the whole entire place is sanitized. And they are going to clean every classroom. They're going to sanitize the classrooms. They're going to hit the high touch areas like the push bars and the doorknobs. They're going to clean the bathrooms down. And then that way, when the kids come in the morning, the school is completely sanitized by that team. In addition to that, our 2 custodians are going to be on staff during the school day, and they are going to be going around, again, hitting all those high volume, high traffic areas, wiping down the main counter at the front desk, hitting all the doors and push bars and windows, doing frequent checks in the bathroom to make sure that things are clean and moving in there, so that, again, that sanitization and cleaning is happening. We also will have sanitization stations around the school. So the little hand stations where you can get hand sanitizer in high traffic areas. And we've also equipped each one of our classrooms with sanitizing stations. There's actually a picture right below me of one in a classroom right now. And those will be permanent, and they'll stay in there even post coronavirus time. So there's going to be plenty of sanitizer around. Our teachers are going to be really focusing on those beginning of the year classroom expectations of frequent sanitization, washing of hands, and just following those really proper protocols so that our kids can, again, remain in school. When we do these extra steps, it's allowing us to be back together in person. One other thing, our teachers are also going to have at their disposals, every classroom is going to have a spray bottle of sanitizer and paper towels. So again, after lunch, or, if there was a material that was used and had to be turned back in, our teachers can quickly spray those things down, wipe them down, make sure that they're safe before any other student uses them before the next day, or that we're just, again, making sure that desks, areas that are, being touched in the classroom are being, the pencil sharpener, things like that those are getting cleaned between uses. Okay, drop off and pickup. There was a lot of questions, mostly about pickup, but I just wanted to touch on drop off as well. So drop off will be mostly our usual routine in the morning. Cars will come in. We'll do our temperature checks, which is one of the biggest changes this year for our drop off. And then we'll get people on their way. Now, the big difference in drop off is because of the temperature checks, if things are going to take a little bit longer, we'll start making a second or third row of cars on the outside edge over here. I think you guys can see my cursor over here. Otherwise, I can do a little annotating. But basically, when we have, let me go back a screen. I am so sorry. Okay. So when we are, again, when we do our drop off, there's usually only one car line, but in this school year, if there's, again, a backup, we'll switch it to a second one where essentially the car line will adjust and we'll get rid of the first one after it's cleared out, and the second one will remain the only line. That way kids will have a clear path into the school building. And that's our biggest concern, is making sure that once they get out of the car, that they are able to walk in without any issue. All right, I got my PowerPoint back up. Here we go. Okay, so that's drop off in a nutshell. Now pickup, we're going to still use our same procedure of at the end of the day, we're going to do stadium style parking. So you're basically going to be double parking each other in rows as we get in there. And there was a lot of concern about families, especially with younger students who may not be able to find the cars and may not be able to figure it out. Initially in our plans, we were asking parents to wait in their cars and the kids come to them. But obviously, if you have a 3 or 4 or even 5 or 6-year-old, sometimes it's difficult to find the vehicle. So if you want to stand outside your vehicle and when you see your kid exit the building, go get them and come back, that would be fine. Our key, or really our goal is that we want the kids to not be kind of lingering around, and we don't want parents to be around, only because when people start chatting and congregating, that just adds more potential for cross-contamination between kids and cohorts. And then, it just could add some more potential for transmission of, touching and things like that. So really our goal is to, we obviously understand the challenges of the young ones finding the car. So we want to make sure that we do this safely and parents can get out, find their kids, and then bring them back. Okay, so school enrollment and cohort. So I wanted to touch on this a little bit because the rumors in the street are that we're filling, the halls, and we have been adding students, but we've been doing it in a safe way. So at the end of June, our total enrollment was 483, and as of today, we're at 509. So we've added, a solid number of kids in the last few weeks since the public schools have closed. But now what we have been keeping in mind is that we haven't been overwhelming our actual cohort sizes. So our average cohort size is 17.5 students right now, meaning that, we're still on the low side per class of kids together. And our cap for cohorts is 20 in each one. So we have certain grade levels, pre-K 4, kindergarten, and first grade, where we have waiting lists in those grades, and we're calling families in as seats open up. But we will never exceed that 20 cap because we want to make sure that we can get kids in the building safely and enter the classroom safely at the same time. So we are adding families, but we are not like packed to the gills either. We're doing it in a safe way and bringing people in, in a way that's not going to overwhelm the system. Now, a couple notes about the cohort size itself. So 20 students is a combination of the in-person learners and the remote learners. And that's going to be critical, especially when I get to the remote learning section in a minute, because what we want to do is we want to keep that seat open for our remote learners, because there is going to be some flexibility to come back in the classroom once remote learning families are safe. So the example that I have in here is, let's say a cohort has 20 kids and 15 of them are in-person learners and 5 of them are remote learners. We are not going to fill those other 5 seats, even though there's only 15 kids in the building, because once those remote learners are comfortable coming back, that seat will be available to them. So again, the cohort's going to be capped at 20 remote and in-person together. Another questions that we got were about who's rotating, the kids or the teachers for cohorts. And the kids are going to remain in their same classroom for the bulk of the school day, and the teachers are going to come to them and they're going to do the rotating around the school. The only exception to that rule is one, if the teacher takes the kids outside for a reading period or something like that, then they will be able to obviously go outside and follow our procedures and protocols of moving through the hallways, when they can wear their masks, and then go into one of the spaces that we're going to have allotted around the school. And the other exception is PE, because we're going to the gym and it's a very large space and we could space the kids out and we have the super tall ceilings. We feel comfortable having gym in, or PE in the parish center. So that will still happen. This year, we will not be changing for PE classes, at least initially. That might change as things go, but to start out, we won't be changing. And Mrs. Petnuzzo and Mrs. Fink have been coming up with really cool ideas for things for your kids to do at the beginning of the year to get some exercise, to get outside, but also doing that within the constraints of the uniform. Okay, that didn't come up. All right, remote learning. So our students and families all have a choice of in-person learning and remote learning. Uh, Basically, with the difference between in-person and remote is that the remote learners are going to be doing a live stream into the classroom. And this week, and part of the reason why we pushed the start date back of the school year was to make sure that we not only had our infrastructure set up for the virtual learning, but also that our teachers are trained up and everything, not only for the unique things we're going to have to do in the classroom, but also how to live stream and do those things at the same time. So remote learners are going to live stream into the classroom. So they're going to see our teachers teaching our curriculum and being a part of our community and doing things our way. So in theory, they're going to be getting the same lesson as the students in person. Now, the difference is that they won't have those interactions with the teacher as strong as the kids in person, but at least they're still going to be able to watch the lessons and then get the exact same materials that the kids are using in person through either Google Classroom or Seesaw. So those materials will be sent and submitted through those programs. As you receive stuff from Google Classroom and Seesaw, you are more than willing to print those things off, have your kids handwrite them, take a picture and send them back. Or if you have an iPad or whatever device they're using, they can do it right on there as well. So there's going to be flexibility in that. Remote learners, again, just to say this again, the remote learners still have a seat in the cohort. So they are not losing their spot. They're not losing their seat. They're still going to be in the cohort that they're assigned. That way, again, once they come back into the building, they will be able to jump back in seamlessly. So a couple of notes about the remote learners as well. When the students are remote learning, we're going to ask that they find an area of the house that's going to be free of distractions, that they're at a desk, they're sitting in a chair, they're sitting up, and that they're actively participating in the video. Last year we were seeing a lot of ceilings and ceiling fans in the background as opposed to the students' faces to see if they're actively listening and actively working. We also are going to say, we want them to be dressed appropriately. And if you want to enforce the uniform from home, by all means, go for it. But they won't be required to have to wear the uniform from home if they're remote learning. And then as far as students remote learning coming in and out of school, well, I'll get to that on the next slide, but there's a couple questions about, hey, if I have a couple students in the older grades and a couple students in the younger grades, and I want the older grades to be in person and the younger grades to stay at home, is that an option? If that's something you're interested in, we can definitely work with you to work something out, but just contact either myself or the front office if you want to split your students as far as remote learners and in-person learners. All right. Okay, so remote learning, exiting and entering the classroom. So families who want to obviously start the year, we have that survey out there. And after this webinar, I would ask that, please fill out that survey out, and I'll send the link out today. Just again, committing to either in-person or e-learning for the start of the school year. But families who want to be back can immediately have your kids start remote learning right away. But you can also, if you have your kids in the building and a couple weeks in, you don't feel comfortable, you will have that option to still go back to remote learning. So if you're at any point you're in the classroom, you say, hey, you know what, I don't think this is going to work for us, we're really concerned, you can step back and do remote learning and continue your education that way. Now, on the flip side, you will have the opportunity to go from remote learning back to the classroom once you feel comfortable, or if you've heard the wonderful things that are happening and you want your child to be back in there. What we're going to do is we're going to ask at the beginning of each month, the first Monday of each month, will be the opportunity to hop back into the classroom. So that way our teachers can, again, prepare materials wise and make sure that we have all the things in the right spots in the classrooms, and then also just to prepare and know attendance wise who's in the building and who's not in the building. So again, there's always going to be situations that are going to come up with families with different, family members or things like that. And if something unique happens that you think might supersede some of these rules, please, again, just don't hesitate to reach out to us in the main office, and we would be happy to work with you and accommodate whatever needs you have. Okay, school mass. So a lot of questions came in about school mass. And really, when we were formulating this plan, when talking with Father Matt, we have the desire to, obviously we're a Catholic school, and being in the mass and being with Jesus in person in the form of the Eucharist is something that we've really found really important. And we're still working on the details of it, of the plan, and what we think that we're still going to attempt to have kids go to school mass. If all else fails and we can't make it happen or we can't make it practically work, we would definitely consider doing live stream masses in the classroom. But when our kids go over to the church has their own reopening guidelines. And if you go to stjamesah.org, you can go on the front website and see what those safety protocols are. We've been running masses at St. James Parish for the last, 2 months or so, every single day successfully without issue. And there are protocols about sanitizing on the way in, distancing each other's in the pews. The way we would do it is groups by cohort. And the church itself has different regulations than what the phase 4 state guidelines are. We can actually have 20% capacity within our church, and our church seats about 900 or so. So we can get about 170, 180 students in the church at any given time. So what we're trying to figure out is how many grade levels can actually be at mass at the same time, and then work on those rotations. Right now we have designated Wednesdays and Fridays as mass days so that we can chop the groups up into smaller chunks so that they can be into the church. So again, there's nothing more Catholic than being at a mass, and we really feel like that's important for our students to get. So we will continue to keep you updated on what the plans are with mass and the scheduling and how many groups are going to be there at a given time. But what I can say is that we're going to continue to space cohorts. We're still going to use the pews that are only the available pews. There's still going to be space in between pews and also in between students, and we're going to group by cohorts, and that way everything is going to be still really effective, and that way the kids can be celebrating the mass with their fellow classmates. Okay, so now time to get into some of the kind of what if and what happens when a child or a teacher gets sick. So let's say we're at school and a student is not feeling well, and they have a fever or 2 or more of the COVID symptoms, which you can go on the CDC's website to look up those symptoms. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to immediately separate those kids from the cohort, send them to the nurse's office, and then they're going to take a look at them. We're going to call parents, and then if they deem that they need to go home, that we're going to ask that they sent home. If symptoms get worse or they don't get better in a day or so, we're also going to ask that you take them to the doctor and have them evaluated for whatever potential testing they might need. So for any student that does see a doctor and then they have a COVID test done and it's negative, once we have a note from the doctor saying that it's a negative test, they're more than welcome to come back in. And again, our nurses, if a student gets sick, they will give you guidelines on what to do in the next steps and all those kinds of things. So what if a student gets COVID? And so in this case, basically, if we have a student with COVID with a fever and they get tested, they would go into an isolation protocol. So there were some emails about the CDC changing its protocols from 14-day quarantine to 10-day quarantine. Right now, the diocese still wants us to do a 14-day quarantine of all our students. So we are still going to abide by that until things change. And if they do, we will definitely let you know. But basically, the student is going to have to stay home until they have 14 days since the first symptom appeared, that any other symptom, outside of the COVID symptoms have improved. 75% is a hard number to gauge, but basically, again, as their child is improving, and they've been going away. But the key is that they have to be 3 days fever-free as well before they can come back to school. If you have testing done and things like that, we would always, welcome a physician's note as well, but they would go into isolation protocol. Now, in addition to the student, the actual cohort that they are in has to quarantine as well. And then the student's siblings, if they have any at the St. James School, also go into that quarantine. And we'll talk about it in a second, more the quarantine guidelines. But the idea is that if we can have one cohort go to quarantine, hopefully that stops the spread from all the other students and other grade levels before we have to shut down more areas. So general quarantine procedures and protocols. So when a cohort is quarantined, everybody, the students and actually the teachers that are allotted in those quarantines would go into a isolation protocol as well. So the students would again have to show that they're symptom free, 14 days away from the first symptom or the kind of the first patient, and then again that the other symptoms have improved enough. Now, when they are at home and you're quarantining, education is not going to stop. So that teacher and our e-learning team here at St. James are going to continue to provide that instruction from a distance. So essentially, they would turn into remote learners for a short window of time. And that teacher, that would be remote as well. So they would be setting up the Zoom calls and continuing to do, direct instruction through Zoom and small group instruction through Zoom, assessments through some of the different tools that we have. And that would continue so that we wouldn't have a 2-week gap in our education as well. So let's walk through just a couple scenarios just to say a couple what ifs. So scenario one, if a student tests positive for COVID. So the student, their entire cohort, including the teacher, will be quarantined for 14 days. So they're going to be home, they're going to be doing e-learning, they're going to be working together. Students in other grades will, and the siblings of the student who, if he or she were to get COVID, would be quarantined as well. And then we would really monitor the cohorts that the siblings are in really closely, and any other teachers that have been in there. What I can say in some of these scenarios is that no matter what the situation is, we're going to take everything case by case and really look at it, get guidance from the Archdiocese and also guidance from local officials here at St. James, really tap into our nurses as well to make sure that we're making the right decisions and, again, keeping all our kids safe. So scenario two, what if a teacher tests positive for COVID? So if a teacher, just like a child, their cohort would have to quarantine because of that exposure. So if that were to happen, the teachers would test positive, they'd have to go home, 14-day wait period, 3 days without a fever, and they'd have to also have other symptoms improve. While quarantining, if they're capable, depending on how sick they are, if they get sick, they would continue the e-learning program. So the students, the e-learning wouldn't stop either way because they can either live stream the other teachers that are already here, or the e-learning team would kind of step up and help out in that area too. Now, if that teacher is a specialist teacher, we're going to look at that case by case, basically seeing, okay, which grades have they interacted with recently, and then make a decision on which groups we would need to quarantine as well. And that might be a few cohorts potentially, if that's the case. Again, if in either the student or the teacher case, we're going to look at everything case by case, scenario by scenario, and quarantine and make decisions that are best for the kids ultimately. And three, so if a student or teacher is in contact with some family member that's not at SJS, so neither a student here or a teacher here that has coronavirus. So what we would do is if you were exposed to a family member or somebody that has contracted COVID, we would ask that you would do a quarantine as well. Again, just to make sure that that exposure is taken care of. Your kids, if they're home on quarantine, again, would just roll into the remote learning program and continue getting instruction digitally. And then once everything's over, no fever, no symptoms, everything's good, they can come back into the building. All right, so if we were to have a student get sick, a lot of questions came with what the communication plan is. So there's actually two stock letters that the diocese is providing us with. The first one is an exposure letter, and this is a general letter that's sent out to the entire school saying, hi, there has been a student that has contracted COVID, and we have quarantined their cohort. There's also a quarantine letter that would go out in the communication plan, and that would be more specific instructions for the exact cohort that would be quarantined in this situation if it were to happen. So we will be communicating out and have that open line of communication when things happen. But it's also really important that we protect the privacy of the students and families that are going, if something like this were to happen, that, we're protecting everybody's privacy. So we won't be using names, we won't be using, time of day, anything like that, but we will be giving you the general information so that you can make a decision about your children and all those kinds of things. And again, keep that communication fluid. Okay, so we had a lot of questions also about some of our pre-K kids and our early learners. So I put a couple pictures on here of some of the classrooms as we're working through some of the ideas. So what you can see right away is that, the rugs are gone, the carpets, the fluffy things, the fuzzy chairs, all those things, we've taken them out of the classroom as those are, kind of germ traps anyways, right? And you can see that the tables on the right, they're spaced out further than what they normally would. So one of the ideas that we're working through is kind of cohorting within the cohort. So our pre-K kids and even our kindergarten kids who are going to be using tables, they're going to still be wearing their masks. They're still going to be at their tables, but we're really going to section off the table so that they're not interacting with the person next to them. And if we need to remove chairs, we are ordering more tables so that we can have less kids per table. And we're going to make sure that they're spaced out accordingly. Now, when they're at their table spaces, we're also going to be utilizing more individualized learning. So things like creating individual sensory boxes, or when we're doing some of our writing or reading curriculum, making sure that each kid has their own set of tools to use. So, when they're within their little mini cohort of kids, they're going to be using more individual things. Then if we use different stations as well, what we're going to do is disinfect each one of those stations anytime a student is using it. So again, they're going to be stations that are more pared down, but we're going to try, play-based learning curriculum is so incredibly important for these kids. So we're really going to make sure that we disinfect in stations, and the only kids that are working together at a station are the kids that are essentially cohorted within the cohort. So if we're looking at our 3 tables, we have a red table, a blue table, and a yellow table. So essentially the students at the red table would only work with the kids at the red table if they were to do a station somewhere else. And those stations would have really specific jobs and roles and things so that the kids wouldn't, be like touching or really interacting with each other as too much. We still want them to collaborate and to do those things, but we also know that we want to keep our kids spaced out enough because our little ones just can get off of task a little bit easier. And then we still will use the floor space in our rooms too. So we still have that nice floor space, and the teachers are going to mark off little squares for our kids to sit in so that we could do more whole group instruction or story times, or do some like the Jolly Phonic dances and things like that that the kids love so much. But while doing that within their little bubble so that they're not interacting with more than one kid around there. So, our pre-K team and our kindergarten team have been working super hard to figure out the challenges of the little ones and social distancing them and working with them from all those different angles. So as we get closer and closer to the school day, our pre-K teams and our kindergarten teams are going to reach out with more information. But we are formulating really specific plans for these kids so that we can make sure that they're really safe, but still learning and doing the things that we find really important. Okay, so some other items. So athletics. So the Archdiocese of Chicago, unfortunately, has canceled athletics for the fall seasons. Winter and spring sports are still to be determined as far as what their participation is. As far as athletics goes, there's certain sports like cross country that were rated low on the governor's lists. And really what the Archdiocese canceled is essentially us competing against other schools. So we're still planning to see if there's any way to get some sort of intramural thing or any sort of local type of athletics going where students can maybe do cross country outside and run, but do it safely distanced and, finding a way to figure out one of the other sports to do potentially. But unfortunately, at this point, we have no promises of athletics, but we're going to try really hard to see if we can provide anything for our kids. Band and choir, both of these things, there's more and more tools and abilities coming out than what was initially in the Archdiocese reopening plan. So we're working really hard to make sure that we can pull these both of these things off. Again, distancing children, and then also for band, finding different covers or ways to safely regulate the instruments so that we're not projecting any of the bacteria through the air. So those are still works in progress. So hang tight on that. And we're really hopeful that we can figure out both of those programs to, again, give the kids more of a sense of normal, give them that extracurricular that those kids love so much, and to continue the progress they've been making over the years. And last, for after school clubs, they've been put on hold for at least the fall trimester until we kind of get our feet under us as far as what the school day looks like. And plus, we don't necessarily want to intermix cohorts after school as well, because that kind of defeats the purpose of the cohort model. So things like band and athletics, again, would also require distancing and kids not mixing as well. So all extracurriculars, we're trying to make as much as we can have happen, but we also want to make sure that we're not overwhelming or doing too much for our kids. Also, before and after care, we're working really hard on trying to figure out what exactly that's going to look like. Again, the diocese sent out guidance on separating kids by cohort for both before and after care. So we're really trying to utilize multiple spaces in our big spaces like the gym and Bulldog Commons and other areas where we can space kids out, give them more individualized toys, disinfect in between use for kids. But it will look very different than it did in years past. So more to come out on those things as we get closer to the school year. Okay, so some other items. So hot lunch, yes, we will have it. Quest Foods is still going to provide hot lunch this year. They're going to come in individualized meals, so you'll be able to pre-order those ahead of time and know what the individualized meal is. So there'll be less options, but you'll still be able to utilize our hot lunch program, and there will be no buffet line. So it's literally just like the box lunches that you can get at restaurants, and then your kid will take them to their classroom or the cafeteria, depending on where they're eating that day. Class/cohort lists are going to be distributed Sunday, August 23rd after the 11:30 back to school mass that we're going to be doing. So if you want to get to mass and have our back to school mass, you can sign up on the website once that hits for the 11:30 mass. And then we'll be just similar to what we did last year. We'll send an e-blast with all the cohort lists on there so you guys can figure out where your kids are going to be heading to this year. School supply drop-off. We're not going to have a school supply drop-off day, mostly because orientation day has gone to a digital format, and I'll touch on that more in just a second. So what we're going to ask is that students bring their materials on the first day of school. For students that are our big kids that can carry stuff, we're going to let them carry that right up to the classroom wherever they're going. For our little ones, where their backpacks are almost the same size as they are, we're going to have a drop-off areas by class for those kids for their materials. So that way parents and students can drop their stuff off, focus on getting our kids in the building, and then later on the teachers and the aides will gather their materials and bring it into the classroom. Orientation day has been switched to a digital format, and we're going to be utilizing smart tuition for all the fee structures and all those kinds of things, which is going to give us more options as far as how to pay the beginning of the school year fees and sign up for things. What we'll do is it'll become basically orientation weekend. So the 24th is technically orientation day, but the Friday before, we're going to send an email with all the instructions for orientation over the weekend, so you can have some time to figure out all the little nooks and crannies for orientation day. So more to come on that. Used uniform sale, we still have tons of used uniforms, and they've essentially been quarantined for the last 6 months. So once we figure out some of the other beginning of the school year things, we'll try to set up a time to have some maybe socially distanced uniform sales, maybe outside, maybe under a tent the first couple of days, so that families can stock up on their used uniforms. But again, more info to come on that and how we're going to process used uniforms. Okay, lockers. So we obviously have lockers all over the schools for our grades 2nd and up, and we're going to be using them very sparingly this year. Really, the only time we want to use lockers is for coat and boot season. Kids are going to be in one classroom this year, so they're not going to have to move materials or things like that. So in essence, they could fill their desk with the materials that they need or have their backpacks in the classrooms. We're also going to invest in some of those behind the chair pouches so the kids can have notebooks and things like that stacked in their classrooms, and then really only use the lockers for overflow. The lockers we're trying to avoid, again, it's an area where kids can congregate and talk to each other and high five and those kinds of things. So we want to make sure that they're continued to be safely distanced inside the school. We had a lot of questions also about religious ed using the building at night. Traditionally, they're in our classrooms Tuesday nights, but this year, the Archdiocese sent their guidelines out for religious ed, and they were only allowed to meet in person once a month. So what the St. James Religious Ed program is going to do is meet once a month in the church. So at least for the foreseeable future, religious ed will not be in the school building. So one less group to disinfect after and sanitize after. So really only the school kids will be in our school building for the school year. And also stay tuned to a theater near you, also called social media, but we're going to be sending out some how-to videos at the beginning of the year here in the next week or so about, how is a temperature check going to look? How is entering and exiting the classroom going to look? What are the classroom, procedures when a kid sits down and gets to their desk, what does it look like when they move around the building? So we have a 5-part series that's going to be coming out. Again, something that you can have your kids watch so that they're familiar with some of the processes before they even get to the building. Okay, so we are on our last slide. And as we navigate through this school year, I'm going to try to do my best to keep you all posted on any changes that are going to potentially be made. Our focus is always on what's best for your kids. And I really think that we have such a talented group of educators on our staff and really people that love your kids and want what's absolutely best for them. And I think that, no matter what, we're really going to make sure that, we're doing what's best for your kids, keeping them safe, keeping them close and growing closer to God, keeping their academics flowing, making sure that we're still differentiating in the classrooms. We're going to have some challenges this year with our cohorts not necessarily being leveled, especially in the older grades. So we're working through some of those challenges right now of making sure that we can provide differentiated instruction to the kids so that we're meeting their ability levels and they can continue to grow from there. So we are going to continue to do what we do best and find a way and figure out how to make this thing work for all your kids. So with that, if there's any questions or chat, I just pulled up the chat window right now. If anybody has any quick questions, we can address those. But otherwise, if you have more questions, feel free at any given point to reach out to me. I know I've been a little bit behind on the emails right now. It's been a little crazy, but hopefully most of the bullets were answered for most families tonight. And again, we can address more specific things as we go, and we'll continue to work through all of the different questions and challenges that come along. So I'm going to sit tight for about a minute and see if there's any questions. And if not, we'll wrap this thing up and then we'll continue working towards the next school year. Okay, so we got a question about any student who will be remote learning at a different school in the morning. So we have some students that in the past, and this year included, have taken classes at St. Viator High School or other places and then come here. So what we'll do is if you choose in-person instruction here and they can live Zoom at other places, we'll find a space within the school for them to do their classes, and then they can head to their homerooms after that so that they can, again, participate in their regular classes after that. We got another really good question about e-learners being able to communicate live with the classes. To a certain extent, yes, we'll allow the remote learners to communicate with the class as it's happening. But I can't guarantee that the teachers are going to be, monitoring the chat as closely as they would if they were just doing the Zoom calls. So our teachers are going to do the best to try to make sure that those kids are integrated in the classroom and give them assessments to make sure that their knowledge is still really up to par in where they're at. So those are some things that we're working through with the live streaming, but we're going to, again, do our best to communicate with those kids even from a distance. All right. Oh, so we got a question about school materials that were pre-ordered. We have all those things. So if you ordered a school supply kit, it is here. And they're sitting actually in the gym right now, and our teachers are going to bring them to the classrooms next week and make sure that all the materials are here. So if you guys had any materials that you sent in, they're here right now from the school supplies. We got a question about before and after care, and that is one of our big topics right now that we're working through as far as how before and after care work. And there is some challenges that go along with that because we still have to group kids by cohort. So one of the ideas that we have is trying to utilize multiple rooms, group kids by age, and then have age appropriate toys and materials in there that we can easily disinfect. Unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of things that, either individual toys or toys that they could play with each other with at a distance. So one example would be maybe buying the board game Battleship. Kids could be 6 feet apart, blowing up each other's battleships and destroyers and those kinds of things after school. For the older kids, we'll give them opportunities to work on homework and do, maybe utilize the Bulldog Commons and some of the tables and spaces in there. But before and after care are still definitely a work in progress right now as we figure out how to safely have our kids in the building, group them within their cohorts, and then send them to class without cross-contaminating or any of those things. Okay, so we had a question also about who will be the remote learning instructor outside of the live stream. So we have obviously our ed tech coordinator, Mrs. Ebron, will be a huge help as far as getting the live streams going and supporting teachers and supporting kids. Also this year, Mrs. Prazu, she went from fourth grade to librarian, is going to be one of our key teachers as the e-learning team. So she's going to also provide a lot of those supports for kids, making sure if somebody's not getting their homework or they can't get on the live Zoom, also doing some social emotional checks with our remote learners as well. So they're going to be kind of the go-to team. And as we're figuring out the remaining schedules, we had some major schedule changes with our upper level teams. We're going to see who else is available to help out with those remote learners to make sure that they're still progressing along as we want them to. We got a question about before and after care payments being automated. And instead of kind of the way we've been doing it, more of handing off a check here and cash there. Eventually, we are working towards automating that. Father Matt always gives me a hard time. He says it's 2020 and we should stop using paper for things like this. So it's in progress. And at some point, hopefully, we can switch to a more electronic form of payment for before and after care. We got a question about the live streams being recorded. So one of the features on Zoom is recording live streams. So ideally, we will be, and hopefully, and again, we're working through these things right now, to record the live streams just in case a student had some technical issues or things like that, so that they can review it again later on and not miss any of the classroom content. So our goal is that the live streams are recorded and then we can send those out on a need to know basis for the kids working at home. Okay, question about parents and pickup and drop off, if they need to wear a mask picking up. Because we're outside, technically you don't have to wear a mask. But if you're more comfortable coming up and grabbing your child at the end of the day, wearing a mask, that would be greatly appreciated. All the staff, even when they're outside, when it comes to pickup and drop off, will be wearing masks just because if they're doing temperature checks in cars or if they're helping escort kids to vehicles, just to make sure that we continue to be safe doing that. But again, if you want to wear a mask, you're more than welcome to, especially when it comes to being close to other folks on campus. We got a question: will parents be notified when a child in their cohort goes home with symptoms? We are working those specific things out. So we definitely will notify if there's a student that tests positive. If that case happens, if they test positive for COVID, there definitely will be a letter that goes home. But if in the case of just symptoms, we're going to work with the nurses to come up with protocol of when we notify parents and when we don't notify parents. But we'll keep you guys up to date on what final decisions are made on that. So we got a question also about some schools where they mandate students and teachers to take periodic COVID testing. It's something that we've thought about internally and had discussions about, but there's no mandate by the diocese to necessarily do that. So that's something that, if down the road that is a recommended thing for us or something that the Archdiocese wants us to do, it's definitely something we would consider. But I'm not entirely sure if that's something that we likely won't have that right away. But if a student obviously is showing COVID symptoms and they're going to the doctor, more than likely they're going to have to test for it. And really, in order to come back, especially if you get a negative test, we really need to see that negative before students can re-enter the building. We got a question about how will proctored tests and quizzes go with remote learning. So the idea behind the proctored tests and quizzes is obviously when we release a quiz home or something like that, and this is primarily for the older students, we don't want the kids to, we want to make sure that it's truly an authentic assessment and really measuring where they're at, not what their ability is to find notes in their notebook. So likely what we'll do is we'll set up times when they take those quizzes where essentially they'll have the Zoom up and then they'll have a teacher or somebody just monitoring to make sure that they are doing their work. A lot of times with these proctor things, the kids will take their devices and they can point it at their table to show that they're not, they don't have any other materials out or anything like that. they could take their assessment, send it back in, and then, that'll just help us to know that it's truly an authentic assessment. Our kids are very smart and intelligent kids, and we want to make sure that they're getting all the goals and all the learning objectives that we send forth for them. Okay, so there is a question about what is there a potential that all of a sudden we could flip 100% to e-learning, or a mandate from the state? At this point, the archdiocese themselves they've really been doubling down on the idea that we're going to be in person and we're going to provide in school instruction. So it would be really unlikely that the diocese would call e-learning. What's not likely to happen, because I don't know what the future holds or what the crystal ball is, but there is a reality where there's a statewide shutdown that would include schools. But again, I don't know exactly what would constitute that, if that means if we move back in phases as state or things like that. But we're just going to keep going until we can't, and we're going to keep providing instruction and find a way. So we had a couple questions about just having some updates before final decisions are made Wednesday. We'll try to get out any of the, some of the things about, the protocols of sending things home, or the notification systems before then. We'll try our best to hammer those things out, so that, families can make their decisions by Wednesday. And then, we'll obviously keep you guys informed of any other changes after that. Okay, so we had a question about students receiving iPads the first week. So we will get kids their iPads and get them onboarded right away with those, and really teach them, this year in the beginning of the school year, really looking at things like classroom expectations are going to be gravely different. How we teach our kids is going to be really different. And one of the focus points of this beginning of the school year is really reteaching our kids and teaching them how to use the iPad, having updated apps like Seesaw and the Google Suite and those kinds of things on there, and making sure that they're really trained up on that. Right now, we're still planning on having the older kids take their iPads to and from school. And we're going to be slowly integrating sixth grade in that picture. But we're also assessing at what point do we send iPads home with younger students as well. Again, just to make sure that we're flexible, and no matter what the scenario brings up, that we're ready to continue to keep that education flowing. We had another question about considering using plexiglass dividers between desks or special HVAC systems to sanitize using more high-powered sanitization. So Plexi Shields, we are outfitting more and more things around the school. We started with kind of the essential areas, the main front desk, the nurse's office, those type of places, to make sure that those are really outfitted. We're slowly getting into the classroom. So now we're plexiglassing teacher desks and things like that. And we're considering, and we've bought some for certain special situations. We are looking into whether or not the plexiglass in between students would be useful. For most of the research I've seen, that as long as the kids are that 3 to 6 feet apart, or whatever the diocese put out there, and when you're closer to the 6 feet apart, the plexiglass is only really effective if the kids are really close together. It's definitely something we'll continue to consider as we research and figure out what's best for the kids. But at this moment, we don't have plexiglass in between the students in the classroom. Okay, great question just came in. And the question is, let's say a child wakes up and has a fever on Monday, and then they wake up, they stay home and they wake up on Tuesday and the fever is gone. So they have a short, cold or flu, or not flu, but something that spikes a fever, and then they get better. In that case, technically with the guidelines, they would be able to return back to school because their symptoms did not get significantly worse. They actually improved significantly. And again, we'll try to get more situational things and more literature out there about those kinds of situations. But if a kid has a sore throat or a common cold, they go home and then they come back, that's okay. What we really are going to be looking at is really the COVID specific symptoms, and obviously the temperature is one of them. But if a kid has shows a temperature and they bounce back that quick, it's really an unlikely chance that they would have coronavirus. So they would likely be able to come back in. But again, we'd be leaning on our nurses and the diocese guidelines on those situations as well. Protocols for bathroom usage throughout the day. Great question. So we are limiting the number of kids that can go to the bathroom at any given time. And our goal is to try to have like 3 or 4 kids max at the bathroom at the same time. So most of our bathrooms have at least 3 sinks. So again, we don't want multiple kids in there. We're not going to be releasing entire classrooms to go to the bathroom, and we're really going to be monitoring that closely. Again, 1, so that there's not too many people in a small space, but then 2, again, bathrooms become like a social area for kids too, and we don't want them to start to linger or get too close or those kinds of things as well. So we'll definitely be continuing to monitor the number of kids that we release to the bathroom so that we're not overloading the system or sending too many kids at the same time. All right. Well, it is 8:30, so we're going to wrap up for the night. I really appreciate all the questions at the end, and I hope this was really helpful. Again, if we did not answer a question that was specific to your situation or anything, or you still have questions, or this kind of triggered something else in your mind, feel free to reach out at any time. We're going to make sure that this place is safe for your kids so that they can get that great education. They can start getting some of those social dynamics back, that they can be learning in the building with us and being a part of our Catholic community. And even just having the teachers back in the building and not seeing them in a Zoom call has me so fired up for the school year. And I think we're really going to do this successfully because, again, we have a ultra talented group of teachers that is going to just do a fantastic job of making sure that your kids are safe and that everything is going to, that we're going to, again, stop at nothing to do what's best for your kids no matter what. So again, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to send the recording out shortly. And again, if you have any further questions, do not hesitate to reach out. Have a nice night.